Severin Films has brought now to Blu-ray a film that I remember from the old, I believe, Thorn EMI VHS clamshell days, or the big box tapes, A Day of Judgment from 1981. This is known amongst horror fans basically as like the religious horror movie. It's set in a small town, small southern rural town in I think the 20s, 1920s, 1930s or so, and it opens with a local preacher man who's just sort of disgusted that he's not been able to make an impact on his flock or on the town. The town doesn't care about the church. They don't care about his teachings. So he's like, I tried my best, but you're on your own. He gets in a little wagon. I was going to say covered wagon. It's not set in the 1820s. It's like the 1920s. He gets in a little horse-drawn carriage, and as he's riding out of town on a covered bridge, he meets a person going the other way who basically looks like death. He's a guy, not that he looks like he can use a good meal, but I mean, he looks like the Grim Reaper. Somebody clad in black, you don't see the face, wide-brimmed hat, maybe with a scythe, and they sort of pass and nod, and the guy in black drives into town, which makes you think you're about to engage in a series of scythe killings, but they don't go that way. The film basically becomes a rural melodrama where all of these people are basically breaking various commandments, treating each other very poorly, being very selfish, not following the teachings, and all of the havoc that wreaks. Results in some deaths, some seemingly at the hand of this man in black, but it's a lot less of that than you would expect. And I had rented this on tape years ago based on a really cool poster on the cover thinking, oh, there's going to be some scythe killings in this. And I don't remember much about it other than being sort of disappointed. And that's because seeing it again, that's what it is. It's really more of a lesson teaching melodrama than it is a horror movie. Until the end. It goes a good long way without much in the way of killings or death, and then it gets kind of nuts and graphic at the end. And I don't know if that was a reshoot done later to make it more commercial or what, but ultimately, this film was, I learned in the extras, this film was originally intended to be something that was just made and shown in churches, not necessarily, an R-rated horror movie aimed at the early 80s, slasher fans, which is when this came out. This came out in 81, which was right in the thick of when 80s horror was exploding. But it didn't really get a theatrical release from what I've learned. There's some fun extras on here. There's a Stephen Thrower who wrote the great book Nightmare USA about regional horror films. There's a great featurette with him that really talks about the history of the movie. And then you get an extra with two people who worked on the movie and or for Earl Owensby, who was the man who owned the studio and produced the film. So you get a lot of the background of where this movie came from, what it was intended to be, what it ultimately became, and it ultimately was that it never really got a theatrical release and it went straight to tape. And that's how I think most of us who ever saw it. Now it's available on Blu-ray from Severin Films. It looks phenomenal. It looks as good as a low-budget movie from 1981 could look. Really good color. There are moments of colored lighting that were really, like I always say, Bava-esque, really striking and impressive that, if you saw it the way I last saw it on tape, it would have just been dark and murky and very, very subdued. But you can see there's some quality filmmaking here and there. I'm not going to say it's a quality movie necessarily. It's pretty low budget and pretty ho-hum for the most part. A lot of the acting is regional theater level. Occasionally rises above that, but a lot of it just seems like, local actors. The period detail is really nice. I think it was mostly shot in an area that maybe hadn't changed a whole lot in the previous 50 or 60 years. The only thing that really tips the hand, which is sadly common of low budget stuff of this era, is the hairstyles. I think a lot of the hairstyles are people who had longer 1980 hair and just kind of slicked it back and hoped for the best. But as far as costumes and locations and vehicles, it's really well done. And I don't know that I would necessarily recommend this. I think this mostly is for people who want to be amused or who are intrigued by a religious horror film, of which there have been a number, but it's not like a huge genre, and who want to see something from 1980 from the studio that brought you such films as Doberman? The Earl Owensby Studios, the North Carolina regional studio that Silent Madness, I believe Earl Owensby Studios did that. Hit the Road Running, I believe they did that. Anyway, available now on Blu-ray from Severin Films is the religious horror film that's looks great, Day of Judgment.